You know what I got the other day, Pete? Stephen King's latest. Want to borrow it?
Do you know who you're talking to?
What do you mean?
Andy, when's the last time I read a paper book? It's been decades. I would much rather use Kindle, or better yet, Audible.
What am I thinking? I don't read paper books anymore either. I'm an audiobook guy all the way. For those looking to listen to the books behind the films that we've talked about here on Movies We Like, not to mention all the other podcasts in the Next Reel family, get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at thenextreel.com/audible.
There are so many great adaptations from Movies We Like available in audio form.
Early on, we covered Casino Royale with director Matthew Gratzner. You went through all of the 007 books on Audible, right?
I did indeed. What a series. We also covered Room with legendary Dee Wallace and Never Let Me Go with costume designer Alana Mooreshead.
We chatted about Fat City with cinematographer Sam Levy and Silver Linings Playbook with the great composer Harry Gregson Williams.
101 Dalmatians and Bambi.
Apocalypse Now, There Will Be Blood, The Thin Red Line.
There's so many great adaptations with so many great guests, and you can get all these as audiobooks on Audible, along with thousands of other great reads.
Producing this podcast is a lot of fun, but it does take a lot of time. We have already dropped the dynamically inserted ads because they are so annoying and have no connection to our content.
Plus, they just jam those things in wherever they see fit.
We listened when you said you didn't like them. So now, we're directly appealing to you, our dear listener. Please consider an Audible subscription to help support Movies We Like and the Next Reel's family of podcasts.
I've been using Audible along with my family for decades now. I love it, and I've read hundreds of books through it. Couldn't be more pleased with their service, and I know you'll love it too. Head to thenextreel.com/audible and get your free trial. It really helps us out. And you have a world of over 200,000 audiobooks open to you.
So much great material available. Dive in with a free trial and get your first free audiobook at thenextreel.com/audible.
Start listening to amazing audiobooks of your favorite movie source material with your first free audiobook today. That's thenextreel.com/audible. Andy, I know you've never been happier than when you're sitting by a warm fire, snuggled up in a flannel and basking in the glow of an old-school budget spreadsheet.
It is a special day I can shut down the world for a little me time.
In a world full of applications, why do these antiquated documents and spreadsheets still run the world? And why haven't they been updated in over 50 years? That's why we want to talk about Coda.
Coda is a new kind of doc that brings words, data, and teams together. It comes with a set of building blocks that anyone can combine to create a doc as powerful as an app.
Coda runs our entire business here at True Story FM, from show scheduling across dozens of podcasts and scripts for thousands of episodes, to budgets and plans and wikis and more.
Coda lets us see our business in a new light. If you'd like to shine a light on productivity in your business and save money along the way, check out Coda today at thenextreel.com/Coda.
Hey everybody, it's Pete. There's a little bit of exclamatory profanity in this episode. If you're listening in the car, you've got little ears around you somewhere, you may want to press pause and come back and catch up with this episode later.
Welcome to the Next Reel Speakeasy on rashpixel.fm. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
I'm Pete Wright.
Each month on the Next Reel Speakeasy, we invite a guest from the industry to join us, and instead of serving up their favorite cocktails, they serve up movies that they love so that we can all talk about them. We'd like to welcome our guest to this month's show, Jayson Crothers. Like most kids, Jayson grew up loving movies. Over time, his love of watching movies inspired the idea to make movies. But he didn't know anyone who worked in the industry and had no idea where to even start. So, he took a Super 8 class at a community college in Arizona, where he was living at the time. And after seeing some of his first films, his instructor recommended he enroll in their cinematography course. As soon as he picked up a light meter, things just clicked. The imagery in films like Seven had a visceral impact on him, so moving in that direction was a natural fit. Jayson continued his education at Columbia College in Chicago and the American Film Institute. After graduation, he jumped into the world of shooting low-budget features, shooting nearly 24, including Amnesiac, directed by Michael Polish, starring Kate Bosworth and Wes Bentley, and Cold Water, a festival hit that found Jayson's cinematography highlighted by critics and one of our trailer picks. In 2013, Jayson joined the Chicago Fire second unit team during seasons 2 and 3, as well as serving as director of photography for several episodes. Since then, he's served as first unit director of photography of the hit series, now in its 5th season. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hi.
Hey.
Yay, I'm finally here.
You know what's awesome? I feel like we're collecting a catalog, Andy, of guests that we've been fans of for a long time. That you were actually a trailer pick for us on the show some years ago, and now you're here talking to us. I'm so excited about that.
What trailer was that for?
Cold Water.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. Hey, I'm honored. Hey, check that out.
Big fans.
Oh, awesome.
Here.
Thank you.
Not only that, you picked a hell of a movie.
Yeah, it's funny.
Right.
At first, I was like, oh, that's easy because like the movie that got me into cinematography was Seven. I was like, Seven. It's like, yeah, we've already done Fincher. It's like, okay, not a problem. Aliens. I can quote that movie. Oh, we've already done that. Okay, and so I started looking through the list, and I was like, wow, you guys are nailing all my favorites, which is a good thing. And I was like, well, what else could it be? And I was like, like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh shit, of course, Heat. Like that's a huge one for me. And scrolling through it, I was like, all right, I don't see that on there. I'm going to roll the dice. So,
well, and it's funny because, we've done a series of heist films, and after you said Heat, Pete and I were like, why did we not ever pick that for our heist series?
Heat in doing heist films.
And it's so funny because I can think back. I have these visceral memories of the show over the last 4 years where Andy and I have mentioned how great fans we are of Heat, and that we've never worked it into the catalog is really frustrating.
That's shocking, but I'm going to take it as a win because it means we get to talk about it today.
He's here. I can feel it.
You search for the scent of your prey, and then you hunt them down. That's the only thing you're committed to.
It keeps me sharp, on the edge, where I gotta be. You want to be making moves on the street, allow nothing to be in your life that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner. No, my life's a disaster zone because I spend all my time chasing guys like you around the block. I do what I do best. I take scores. You do what you do best, trying to stop guys like me.
Yeah, Heat is just a spectacular film, and Michael Mann is certainly the person to make it. What is it about this film that you connect to so well, aside from the fact that it's just such an amazing movie?
See, now that I'm so excited to talk about it, I'm like, where do I start? I'm like a dog who's too excited. Like, I don't know, where do we go? I'm outside for the first time. Where do we go? Everything smells so great. Everything about them. I mean, you've got an absolutely brilliant cast, and you've got people that are like insanely talented in comparatively small roles. So like in a movie that, hey, this role, they're in 4 scenes in this almost 3-hour movie. So we can put almost anybody in here. You've got some amazing actors taking these small roles. So the entire cast is spectacular. You've got Pacino and De Niro, who, the entire movie is fundamentally kind of about their relationship, and they spend so little time on screen together, but you got that great build up to that moment, and it doesn't disappoint. The soundtrack is great. The cinematography is brilliant, and it's just kind of the thing that I've always really respected about it is it's this sprawling. It really is a sprawling kind of epic crime drama set against Los Angeles, but it's actually a very small, intimate movie about. I mean, if you want to narrow it down, it's about 2 men, but it's really more about the handful of lives and how they're impacted by all these different choices. So for me, I'm a huge fan, largely I think because it's a very small, intimate story about a handful of people set against this very, very big backdrop.
And it's so much like what Michael Mann really loves to do in his films. It's kind of how people's working lives affect their personal lives.
Yeah.
And kind of that balance that people have between the two, and the struggle people have between the two, and trying to make both of them work when they're really passionate about something.
Or the lack of balance. I mean, I think that's the other thing is in the attempt to balance it, if you're really passionate about something, about your work, in this case, these men going, right, we're passionate about our work, and they try to balance their work and their lives. And I think at a certain point, they kind of realize like, hey, our work is our lives. So we keep trying to balance going, how do we get to have both? When the reality is Well, the thing that your work is also the thing that you love, so that is your life. You just have to learn to accept it.
You know, it's funny. Like, I found myself thinking as I'm watching this, Michael Mann, it feels like every one of these films, you know, from Thief to Manhunter to Heat to Insider, Collateral, Miami Vice, Public Enemies, even the disastrous Black Hat. Eventually, we're all going to be able to look back on these movies as essentially biopics of Michael Mann himself.
That's very funny. Or to a certain extent, even, you want to get one step even further, even Last Mohicans, sort of the same thing too.
Yeah,
it's
you're
the
right.
same idea. It's less of work and life, and there it's more of like a cultural identity. But it's the same exact themes in all those other movies.
Right. Where does he fit into?
Maybe this is just a cry for help. Maybe we should all go to Michael Mann and give him a hug.
He needs an intervention. For crying out.
I think it's actually good that he's making these crime films, because otherwise he might be one of these criminals.
This is an outlet. That's what it is.
You find out in reality, like, he's Wayne Grow, and Heat is actually modeled after him, and he's going out late at night and beating underage prostitutes in downtown Los Angeles. He's like, listen, that's my therapy. Don't judge me. Don't judge me.
It's awful. Awful, but everybody needs an outlet? Is that what you say in this case? It's terrible.
Maybe that's what he's saying. Maybe the Heat is a cry for help. Maybe that's what he's saying.
Help.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I'd forgotten just how much of this was inspired by the true story. Criminal Neil McCauley killed by one of Mann's friends, Chicago detective Charlie Adamson, back in the 60s. And it was one of these relationships that inspired this movie, that these are two men, that these are ideologically opposed guys, and yet they had this sort of respect and as has been said, fondness of one another in spite of their positions related to the law. And Mann has said, they had a kind of intimacy that only strangers can have. And I think that's such a fascinating, it's one of the things that the film does so well, that this is a relationship of great mutual respect, and it's carried off so beautifully by Pacino and De Niro. And it's such a well-earned point when they meet for the first time on screen, that we know that Pacino and De Niro are on screen for the first time together is epic in itself. So the fact that they actually pulled it off and made it an earned part of this story, it's just explosive for me.
For me, we're going to jump right to the end of the movie for a second, but on that point, the end of the movie when, after Pacino shot De Niro and they're out there in the middle of the LAX fields together, they take each other's hands. For me, I kind of feel like that wraps up the whole movie of we've been chasing each other, this cat and mouse game. You're ruining my life, I'm ruining your life. We've just been shooting at each other. All right, fine, you won, and we're gonna have, like you said, this that intimacy of strangers. Of as much as we're strangers, we're so disturbingly similar and alike that if I'm going to lie out here dying because you shot me, somehow that seems fitting, and I'm going to have this final moment with you.
Yeah.
The end of the movie is so good. Like that moment at the end, like they just kind of grab hands, and there's nothing else said. You're like, well, what else? There's no point of a big monologue. Like, what are we going to say now at this point? It's just great.
It's so good. And I found it so interesting that image was the first image that Michael Mann had in his head when he kind of came up with this whole story. He got that image in his head, and he ended up kind of crafting the entire story backwards from that moment.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, yeah, because the last shot is just that wide shot, like the two of them, their silhouettes against the skyline, and it just sits there. There's no crane, there's no big dolly, there's nothing dressing it up, because it's like, all right, this is the movie. These two guys lying out, these two guys standing there, one of them waiting for the other one to die, and they're having this really intimate moment. And they're essentially, and for all intents and purposes, they're enemies, but they're not. That image kind of symbolizes the whole movie.
Yeah, and I don't even see them as enemies at that point, right? They're competitors.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. On paper, they should be enemies. On paper, like his job is to avoid getting caught. His job is to try to catch him. So on paper, they should be enemies. But at that moment, it's interesting. In the diner scene, Pacino makes a reference. He uses the word brother. And it's thrown away as like friend, pal, whatever. But for me, it's always struck me it's a really interesting choice of words. Because I'm like, you guys really are akin to being brothers more than anything. You guys just happen to be in completely different ideologies.
That's a great point. It's actually like some of those crime films where other filmmakers have told a story where it is two brothers and they've kind of taken each side of the law, and it has that same sort of vibe. It's so hard for other people in this film to really understand the level they're at and the whole reality that they set for themselves and the world that they create. But these two guys totally understand each other. They are both at the top of their respective career path. They both are so good that they're really kind of right there. And these guys, they recognize that in each other. And even though it is one of those things where it's like, next time we meet, I'm going to be gunning for you, you're going to be gunning for me, but they still have that respect.
Absolutely. I mean, it's even there's that scene under the bridge with De Niro and
John Voight.
Yes, thank you. And he makes a comment about, hey, he said he respects you.
Yeah.
Like, all right, there's a moment there where you're like, and he's not shining him on. It's like, yeah, there's respect of like, hey, these guys are really good. You are really good. You run a great crew. You're excellent at what you do. To a certain extent, I think there's an enjoyment factor of, listen, if I'm going to be driving my third marriage into the ground and out all night and ruining myself, hunting somebody, I want it to be somebody that's worth my time and not some asshole or some idiot that's going to make it too easy. Like I want it to be worth my time and my talents.
Yeah, and it's the conversation he has with Justine in the hospital too. After they've come to terms with the fact that there's no hope for their marriage, and they come to this sort of sober reckoning through the attempted suicide of her daughter, that there's no way they can go on as partners because of who he is, because of his drive to actually be the ideological crime fighter. I find that such a powerful and interesting to me because it is emotionless, that scene together. Like it's so sort of calculated and yet so approachable. It doesn't feel like I'm distanced as an audience member. What's so interesting for me as we're talking about these archetypes, and one of the things I think Mann as a director is so good at, as sort of this best-in-class crime director, is that he approaches these archetypes, these white hat, black hat, cop, robber, good, evil kind of pairings with such a delicateness that at the end of the film, I feel like I'm the major change character in the film, right? That I'm a participant here, and I have to choose in a very complex equation of good versus evil what I believe is good and bad between two characters that are neither completely good or bad, in my view. And Andy made a point in the pre-show to me about that, how interesting it is that we're drawn to Macaulay despite the fact that he's a complete sociopath. How good does that make Michael Mann?
He also, there's two great scenes that juxtapose themselves. When De Niro and his whole crew are at dinner, they're at a very nice restaurant. They've got their kids, some of them have their kids there, and they're all there with their dates, and they're having a good time, and it's very refined. And it's a very nice restaurant, and very polite and upper class. And then he juxtaposes it with all the cops are out with their wives and girlfriends, et cetera, and they're drinking too much, and they're telling stupid stories, and they're kind of making fools of themselves. And for me, it's such a subtle thing, but I was like, that's so great, because we're kind of ingrained to go, the cops are the good guys, the robbers are the bad guys. There's certain expectations you have, and you're watching, you're like, well, wait a second, the robbers seem to be really nice. The robbers seem to be murdering robbers, seem to be really nice people and have families, and this all seems great. And the cops are over here that seem like a kind of a couple of schlubs, and they're drinking too much and making fools of themselves. But it's that balance constantly of, I know you're a murderer. I know you're a thief. I know that you're a terrible human being. But the cops over here, they're not much better, because they're also technically murderers, and they're abusive of their position of powers. And it's come out recently, Pacino was saying, it never really is addressed in the movie, but the backstory is he's got a coke problem, so that explains a lot of the performance choices. We're like, he's coked out for half the movie.
Right.
They're like, The label of, good guy, bad guy only, I think, goes so far as, cop and robber. And then beyond that, you're like, yeah, after that, it's just a really broad stroke of gray.
But I think he does it so well here because of this blend of character and the length of the story. I mean, it's a nearly 3-hour film.
Yeah.
We get to know so many different people. There are so many different threads that he weaves through here, and we see such a wide swath of the types of people in this world, whether it's somebody who's just been released and he's on parole and he's trying everything he can to make it straight, but everybody is pushing him down and it's putting him into a position where it's easier to go back into the life of crime. Or somebody like Chris and his relationship with his wife, where he's getting lots of money, but he's also has a horrible gambling problem and he's blowing everything. And you get such an interesting painting of just the way that people live. Not so much in the cop side other than Pacino, but you still kind of get this wide, portrayal of a variety of characters, which I think Mann does so well here.
For me, actually, one of the most telling scenes for me in the movie, and it's sort of a throwaway scene, but for McCall, like kind of a good reference for who and what Macaulay's all about, is when he follows Charlene, Ashley Judd's character, to the hotel and kind of bursts through the door after she's had the affair with Hank Azaria's character. He's listening to all this and he's like, no, listen, what I need from you is you need to give my guy another shot. And if he fucks up, you know what? You're done. And I'll set you up. You get to keep your kid. I'm watching that scene again because I watched it the movie earlier this week, just kind of refreshed my memory. And I was like, it's equal parts like abusive relationship boyfriend, but also oddly noble of, I need you to give somebody of my crew one more shot. But if he fucks up, you know what? Then it's on him and I'll make right by it and I'll take care of you. It's so psychotic, but it's guided by such a specific, I think, sincerely good intentions. Again, it's such a small scene, but I feel like it's so indicative of I guess, the complexities of Macaulay's character.
Oh, yes, because he's the aspirational character here. As the criminal, he's the one who is getting his emotional life in order. He's finding a relationship. He's looking forward to settling down and getting out. And all of these things are driving him toward the ideological good. Right?
Yeah.
What he's doing practically to get there is something that we can judge as bad, but why he's doing it, his intention is so it's the purity of the film, and I think that's fascinating.
His delineation of his career path is so set. This whole mindset. You've got to be able to dump everything in 30 seconds. But the fact that he's going in there and kind of creating this relationship world for Chris, so that Chris can kind of, I guess, stay in his own good mindset as he continues working. I found that really interesting in that scene.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like he recognizes that that Chris needs this stability in his life. That's what he needs. So right. I'm going to help facilitate that because being a good person, he's my friend and I want to take care of him, make him happy. Being the boss of this crew, I need his head in the game. Again, it's also interesting, the whole that idea of being able to walk away in 30 seconds. I'm always fascinated by, at the end of the movie, he comes walking out of the hotel, sees Hannah coming down at him, and he's looking at the girl in the car, and I'm, as an audience member, I'm yelling at the TV. I'm like, you need to run. Like, what was all this talk about walking away in 30 seconds, and you're lingering. And for God's sakes, start running. Like, this is when you start, like, this is the heat coming, quite literally. You've been building this whole thing up and he can't do it. It's that delay of, do I stick around? Do I run? Do I stay? Do I go? And it's the fact that he now has something he's connected to. He can't walk away in 30 seconds. I feel like ultimately that's kind of what the undoing is. Because, yeah, if he'd turn, that fire truck pulls up and like that was his opportunity to just cut and run, and he didn't.
He's welcomed that emotional connection into his life. I mean, it's like in that scene you were talking about earlier, that restaurant scene where all the gangsters or all the robbers are all dining together. Everybody has a partner except for him.
Yeah.
And that so he goes and calls Edie and reconnects with her. And he really finally allows that to build in his life. And you can see that it's interesting because he allows that emotion to kind of become a part of his life. But by doing so, it in a way becomes his undoing, because that triggers him to then, when he gets the call from Nate that, hey, I found Waingro, he's in this hotel room, but you're not going to care at all, right? And he agrees with him. But now that he's kind of let that emotion into his life, it's like that thing just eats away at him. I think at the beginning of the film, before he had met Edie, if he had gotten that call and he knew he was, the heat was on to him, he probably would have just let Waingro go. But I think there's something about him at the end and the way that he's changed now, that when he gets that call from Nate, he just can't let it go anymore. And he has to go after Waingro now. And it really became his undoing.
Yeah, because I think it's also, to me, I always took it as is that moment of closure of, I'm going to get on a plane with Edie, we're going to take off, and I'm done. My whole life, I'm going to leave it behind me. I've got closure on everything, it's done. And it becomes that moment of, if Waingro's still walking around, there's a loose end I didn't tie up, and I can't fully walk away until that's done. Until he meets Edie, he doesn't have anybody in his life. So it's interesting, that idea of, this is the mantra that I live my life by, but I've never had to put it into practice. Like, you don't ever see him, he keeps talking about it, but he built a lifestyle where he doesn't have anything he really is going to really walk away from. And so when he brings Edie into his life and suddenly goes, all right, well, now I've got that relationship. Now I have somebody that I have to walk away from. Suddenly it's a lot harder to do it than it is to walk around saying it.
They even have that conversation, the exact same conversation, before they go into the bank heist, because they realize that, there's more, now they're being watched and all this sort of stuff. And he has the conversation, we should just walk away.
Yeah.
But I want in because of, the risk is still, it's higher, but the reward is still greater. But he still goes into it. And it's like he's never been able to kind of let go of something.
Obviously Chris says yes because Chris is going, I need money or my wife is going to leave me. So, we've got this $12 million bank job. So yeah, the risk is worth it to me. Torito feels like a character who's like, hey, I'm just kind of along for the ride and I don't really want to have to make decisions. So I'm going to let somebody else do it. It's really interesting. Macaulay keeps saying, hey, there's the heat. We should walk away, and keeps finding reasons not to do it.
Right.
It's interesting when you look at Mann as a screenwriter. He obviously wrote the script, and specifically to this issue and some of the archetypes that we're talking about that he builds into the script. He's kind of an interesting screenwriter, and I wonder if you guys could comment on this. So I'm going to read a couple of passages from the screenplay with intention to talk about character development and the hand that Mann puts into backstory that never really come out in what they show us on screen. This is the very first page of the script, exterior Cedars-Sinai, wide day. Neil Macaulay and a nurse get off a bus. Neil carries a paper bag and wears white pants like a hospital attendant. Neil is an ice-cold professional, very big, very tough. At 42, his short black hair is graying. He spent 8 years in McNeil and 3 in San Quentin. He got out and hit the street in 1987. 4 of the McNeil years were spent in the hole. Neil's voice is street, but his language is precise like an engineer's. He's very careful and very good. He runs a professional crew that pulls down high number scores and does it anyway. The score has to be taken down. If on the prowl, a burglary, that's fine. If they do have to go in strong, armed, that's fine too. And if you get in their way, that's got to be your problem. His lifestyle is obsessively functional. There's no steady woman or any encumbrance. Neil Macaulay keeps it so there's nothing he couldn't walk away from in 30 seconds flat. That's how we meet Neil in the script. Chris Shiherlis is on the second page. Chris wears a hard hat over a Mongol cut, Levi's, black boots, and sleeveless sweatshirt, and carries on one shoulder a 150-pound red Milwaukee Tool Company case. Looks like a construction worker by day who by night hits LA's slams, jams, and raves. He's 29 from Austin, Texas. Chris is also a Highline pro, a boxman who knows 5 ways to open any safe made. This kind of detail comes with every character in the film. And when you hear the actors talk about working with Mann, the level of detail that they put into developing backstory that's never directly conveyed on screen is significant. What do you think about his work as a screenwriter and what it actually brings to screen in these characters?
I'm not surprised. It's interesting. I've never read the screenplay for Heat, but hearing that, it's not surprising because I feel like that kind of attention to detail in the descriptions and the setup of things comes across in the detail, in the performances by everybody, and also the detail. I mean, just all the details of the movie. The details of production design, the details of the reality of how certain things work. There's an enormous amount of authenticity, I feel like, in all of his movies. Like you very rarely feel like you're watching a movie, or you very rarely feel like you're watching actors portray characters. He creates it's not just performance, but I think he creates environments, and to a certain extent, it really is kind of world building of authenticity of this world of police and of criminals. Those details, although a lot of them, some of them are addressed in the movie very briefly, but even if it wasn't, I think all that kind of stuff comes across on screen through performance. Kind of unrelated to this, but I remember watching some behind the scenes thing with about Miami Vice, and somebody on the behind the scenes was talking about they were scouting in Havana or something. And Michael Mann pointed across the street at a car and said, "Oh, I love that car. We should have that car drive by in the background for this scene." And the guy said, it wasn't, "Oh, I want a car like that." It was, "I want that specific car that I'm pointing at. So let's go find out how to get that car, because that's the car that belongs on the street driving by." And it's that attention to detail that I think comes through on screen that makes his movies work so well.
Well, and I think it is that attention to detail that I think is just intrinsically in his blood, whether it's as he's writing the script or as he's directing the film, or even as he's kind of watching the edit unfold and seeing how the story's working. I think he really just taps into just every little detail. He talks about how there's like when they were location scouting for this film, they were looking for the location where Hannah comes and examines the crime scene when they find the dead prostitute, the young girl. And he says, "Oh yeah, and see, there's that dead bird floating in the pool. That bird, when we scouted the location, there was a dead bird floating in the pool." And it's like, that's such an interesting thing to just see sitting like that. And so when they came back, he had his art department put a fake dead bird in the pool so that he could have that. And it's just in the corner of the shot, just for a few fleeting seconds, but it's there.
Yeah.
And those are the things that he puts in. Like you said, it's the world building, the way that he creates this for us.
And and that's also so great, because that attention to detail it's interesting, because that attention to detail, it's not for me, I feel like it's not just for the audience. It's not just for the audience of what do you see on screen? Because like you said, like dead bird floating in a pool, it's there in one wide shot. Almost nobody's ever going to pick up on that detail. But it's that attention to detail, that world building that creates an environment for the actors, so that as an actor, I feel like you walk into that environment and go, this is not a set. This is not a place that we just showed up and we're going to point some cameras at. This becomes a real, visceral, living 360-degree environment that now, as a character, I can inhabit. And I think so it's not just for the audience and the authenticity that shows up on screen, but I feel like a big part of that also is just creating an environment of authenticity for the actors as well, because I think the more artifice you can strip away from the environment of a set, the more freedom you give to an actor, and the more responsibility you give to an actor of, hey, we've given you a world, so you just get to inhabit it now, and we're going to watch and see what happens.
Going back to locations, he had his locations department scour LA. So much of LA has been shot in so many films, but and this film had like over 100 locations is what I heard. And he had his team find locations that nobody had ever seen before. I think in the over 100 locations, fewer than 10 of them had been filmed before. And I think that just speaks to, again, that kind of the detail in creating this world.
No, absolutely. I'm in Chicago now on my current show, but before I came out here for the show, I've been in LA for 10 years. And watching Heat, I'm still watching it. I'm like, other than a handful of scenes, I'm like, I have no idea where that even is. I'm watching the movie. I'm like, I could not begin to tell you where that might even be in Los Angeles. I know I'm in Los Angeles. I know this movie is clearly like the architecture, the vibe, like everything about the movie screams Los Angeles. But yeah, there's locations I'm like, I've lived there for a decade and I've shot all over LA. And I'm like, I have no idea where that is in LA, but it's beautiful. I wish I could find it.
One of the things we like to to do on the show is try and find that sort of thematic connection between the first shot and the last shot of a film. I think this one, you've already talked about the importance of the last shot, particularly the importance, as Andy said, that the first image that Mann had in his head that informed the entire script. But how do we connect the very first shot and the first image we see with the last?
And the first shot in this one is that smoky night train yard as the train kind of is pulling in, really bringing Macaulay into this story.
It's interesting because that very first image, and that type of image pops up throughout the whole movie. That idea of that dark skyline, and there's some kind of piece of architecture or structure or an industrial thing of some sort. There's a lot of industry in the movie. That idea of like an industrial piece of architecture kind of jutting up against the skyline at night without any other people around it. Like that first shot is really about architecture and machines, and there's no people. It's very lonely. And the same thing at the end of the movie, if you took the very last frame of the two of them juxtaposed against a skyline surrounded by a lot of kind of industrial, lights and those giant containers out in the field near LAX. If you took Hannah and Macaulay out of that shot, it would be thematically, I think, the same thing as the opening shot. I mean, so if you take that idea, expand upon it, everybody in the movie is to a certain extent pretty lonely. Hannah is in a marriage, but they mentioned it's his third marriage, and it's not a good marriage. Macaulay is not married, and the person that, he gets Edie in his life at some point, but not really, because she doesn't know anything about him really, because he's lying to her. Chris, it's like, great, I'm married with a kid, and I'm constantly in fear of her leaving. Like, the whole movie is everybody's pretty damn lonely in this city. And as much as they keep trying to make connections, they're all missed connections. They're all kind of, everyone keeps kind of struggling and reaching, and no one's really getting any the type of connection or relationship they want, primarily because everybody is making other choices that fundamentally go against those connections. It's interesting. I'm kind of rambling on now, but I never thought about how the opening shot and the end shot, how similar they are to each other.
Well, and I think that gets to exactly, it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it right now, because you were just talking about kind of the locations, the fact that they were so unfamiliar, and the locations in the first and last shot for me they're sort of alien, right? They're kind of, this is a place that is familiar to me, but I am distanced from it, because I get a train station, I get that, it's LA, but I've never seen it. I get that we're in an airport in the last shot, but it's a part of an airport that I rarely see and have never been personally. So again, it's that sort of, I'm placed there, but I'm distanced from it. And that's kind of the whole thing the whole theme of the film is putting me in a space that is unfamiliar yet familiar all at the same time. And I think it works really well. I
mean, I agree absolutely, but I think you take it even one step further of the reason they're unfamiliar to you is because they're places that, like you said, it's a train line, it's part of LAX. But they're the parts of the train line, they're the parts of LAX that very few people ever go to. Like, there's a very small specific group of people that ever go to those spot, like that spot on the train line or that spot at LAX. So they're kind of away from the mainstream. They're kind of isolated. Very few people go out there, and the people that go out there are out there to do a specific job that's, again, kind of lonely. So I think that's a big part of it is a lot of the locations you're seeing in the movie these are places that the reason they feel alien is because very few people have to come out here. And the people that do come out here for a specific reason to do a job, and then they leave. So they're very lonely places because of that.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier there's a lot of industry in the film, and one of the things I think is so interesting about just the presentation of it is that this is showing me Los Angeles almost as if it's trying to show me Los Angeles as it is, right? This is a bank in Los Angeles. This is a refinery in Los Angeles. These are the things that happen in Los Angeles, not the Los Angeles that we see with the lights and the glamour and the Mann's Chinese theater. And this is Los Angeles that is not encumbered by Hollywood.
Heat is never going to be a movie for tourism.
Right.
Yeah, there's no Santa Monica Pier, there's no beach, there's no Hollywood Boulevard, there's no Santa Monica. Like, watching it is, again, because, I first moved to LA. It's like, oh, it's beaches, Mann's Chinese theater and celebrities on every corner. And after living there just for a few months, I lived in Hollywood when I first moved there, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of darkness and a lot of ugliness to Los Angeles. And watching Heat again, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of that movie. And I'm like, that's a very fair representation of a lot of parts of LA. And there is, as much as LA is, it can be and is a beautiful city, there's a lot of ugliness in LA as well.
And as much as LA, makes up so much of the world here, obviously we've got an incredible cast of people here that really lend to it. I mean, just reading through the list: Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Val Kilmer, Diane Venora, John Voight, Tom Sizemore, Michael T. Williamson, Ashley Judd, Amy Brenneman, Natalie Portman. I mean, the list just goes on and on. There are so many people in this movie, and they are all doing just great things here. Right out of the gate, I think, obviously, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, those were two of the draws for Michael Mann when he started putting this together, and he felt that those two guys were those two parts. He went after them, and they both were interested. So I think he got exactly who he wanted for his two leads.
I mean, they're great. Also, keep in mind, kind of going down that list, don't forget, you've also got Tom Noonan, does get and Henry Rollins, Henry Rollins, out of nowhere. Like, I actually had to pause, and I was like, "Holy shit! I forgot Henry Rollins is in this movie." That's what I was saying earlier. Is every single role in this movie is filled with one really talented, really interesting casting choice after the other. That also just bolsters the world between Pacino and De Niro as well, because they're surrounded by other great people. So you've got this, it's like, obviously they're the headliners of this cast, but they're, the people around them supporting them are the same thing, all kind of at the top of their game.
Well, I mean, at some point you have to step back and ask yourself, why wasn't Heat the catalyst for Tone Lōc's movie career? He was so funky, so funky.
The world will never know.
The world will never know. So there is an alternate universe in which Tone Lōc actually is Vince Hanna, and I'd like to live in that world just for a little bit.
Next year they're coming out with a new restoration of Heat.
I actually think they did face replacement, and Tone Lōc is.
Oh, I'm so sad that's not true. Oh, I'm so sad that's not true. I'm wondering though, there might be time to start like an online petition to do a behind the scenes documentary about why wasn't Tone. What happened to Tone Lōc? What happened? If I had more talent in Photoshop and a lot more time, I might try to make an alternate version with face replacement over Hannah with Tone Lōc. I'm sad that will never exist now.
But we can dream.
We can dream.
If anybody's listening to this with a lot of insane CGI skills, I will pay cash money to see this version of Heat.
This is a thing that must happen.
I'm putting this out there right now.
You know what's funny? In all seriousness, this is I said how impactful this was, seeing De Niro and Pacino on screen together. This was a thing that for me in my age when this movie came out, this is a thing I really wanted to have happen. And it satisfied me. It had the weight on screen that the now absolutely abused pairing of Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman just never quite accomplished.
I've watched the movie countless times. I've actually watched that specific scene over and over again a few times because the way it was shot has always been really interesting to me as well. Because the whole idea of it's kind of famous now. They didn't rehearse anything, so they kind of kept the spontaneity of things. And they shot it with I think 5 cameras rolling all at once. They shot basically every single angle all at the same time. When they had it, so the actors could really play off performance, and they didn't have to go, oh great, we loved take 6 of your performance, so we're going to match to that. But what's so great about it is the movie was marketed as a buildup of, this is, you're going to finally see Pacino and De Niro, and they're going to face off. And when you finally have the big confrontation, it's a very small scene on the side of the highway of, hey, do you want to go get a cup of coffee with me? So really, everybody talks about the diner scene, but really the first time they actually meet is De Niro sitting in a car and Pacino standing on the side of the freeway being like, hey, come have a cup of coffee with me. And then the following scene, I think the brilliance of it is that it's such a small, quiet scene. It's 2 guys sitting at a really nondescript, kind of shitty looking diner, having a cup of coffee. Like, it's so anticlimactic to what the buildup is. And I think that's actually what makes it great. And that most of the scene really lives in two close-ups of these two guys just kind of bantering back and forth. In its presentation, and I mean this in the best way possible, in its presentation, it's almost pedestrian. But because of that, because it's not dressed up, as an audience, you really get to just sit there and kind of soak it all in and see all the nuance of performance and the looks and all the subtleties. Because it's not dressed up, because it's not a big thing.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm curious your opinion on this, because as you mentioned, there is the re-release coming out, this new 4K remaster. It's timely that we're talking about this movie, because just last week they did they had a big premiere of this new remastered version in LA, and the whole cast showed up.
Yeah, I know. I was heartbroken I couldn't be in LA.
Oh, it's fantastic. And Oscars on their Oscars YouTube page has just posted a channel or a playlist of a bunch of videos from these. And in these, they talk specifically about the diner scene. So Michael Mann says that he says they were shooting primarily with 3 cameras, one over each shoulder for close-ups and one 2-shot. In the final film, obviously, we get no 2-shot. And that, of course, has fueled conspiracy theorists saying that, in fact, they were never actually in the diner together. Were it not for behind-the-scenes photos actually showing them together. We do have that. But in any case, they made an interesting strategic decision, a visual decision, not to include the 2-shot in this conversation between these two guys. Why do you think that is? And do you think that, do you think it would have been stronger, or how would it have been different had they gone with a 2-shot?
It's interesting. I haven't actually thought about it now that you mention it. As much as the two of them are connecting, the two of them really are. I feel like they're still miles apart from each other. It's the idea of, like, great, we're sitting down, we're having a conversation, we're having a cup of coffee, we're getting to know each other, but not really. Like, we're not really, the information being given is from Hannah is oddly personal and intimate, but nothing that could hurt him. Whereas Macaulay is giving really generic information. I have a woman. I tell her I'm in sales. Like, nothing that Hannah could use later on and get to use against him. So it's interesting that it's the scene very much is still, as much as they're sitting across from each other having a cup of coffee and connecting, they couldn't possibly be further away, because at the end of the day, it's you're trying to capture me and I'm trying to get away from you. You could make the argument that showing a 2-shot puts them both together in the same space together, and it makes it a moment about the two of them together, when in reality it's the two of them are there. Hannah's trying to get information to size them up. Macaulay, if you watch his performance, Macaulay spends the first half of that scene kind of looking around left to right, trying to figure out, like, where are the exits, and are we the only people here, and what's the angle? Is this some kind of a setup? Like, am I going to have to bolt and run? So it's interesting, again, never not knowing the shots that aren't used in the edit. I think you could make the argument that 2-shot creates the illusion of a relationship between the two of them that doesn't actually exist. And if you go one step further, now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if the only actual 2-shot of them together is the very last shot where they're next to each other, holding hands. I wonder if that's the only shot where you see the two of them in some kind of a wider shot together that way.
That's what I was thinking, and that's why that's kind of been my interpretation of this. And I wasn't watching the film with that in mind, but I had the impression that Mann didn't want to give us that pairing of these two guys, like, really connecting on screen together until that last moment.
Because, as you say, like, we don't want to imply a relationship that does not exist, when in fact at the end of the film, it's in his death scene that relationship does exist, maybe for the first time.
Yeah.
As authentically.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Wow, that is great. I never thought about it until right now.
I need to go watch it again and see if they ever are really in a 2-shot together.
Yeah, I'm now genuinely curious. Like, now I want to go back and, like, turn the sound off and study the movie more and go, holy shit, look at that.
Yeah, right? I think there's
that goes back to, like, what we were talking about earlier, is that, like, the meticulous attention to detail of Michael Mann, and that's in all of his movies. That idea of, nothing is ever passive. Like, there's never a passive decision of, oh, we're going to shoot a close-up. Like, that close-up has real intention, real meaning that maybe you don't realize until later in the movie, or, as we're discussing right now, maybe it's a subconscious thing you don't ever realize consciously, but you feel as the movie goes along.
Let's do some rapid fire through some other cast members we have not yet talked about. Val Kilmer, Chris Shiherlis.
Val Kilmer when he was like still being awesome.
Right. Although this was the same year that Batman and Robin came out.
Yeah, that's what he said this week.
Or was it Batman Forever?
It was Batman Forever, and it was this week at the event. He said, the most fun I ever had doing Batman was in prepping for heat.
Yeah. It was funny. I was talking to someone last night about this. Years ago, I had a chance to shoot. Val Kilmer was doing this one-man show as Mark Twain. And it sounds kind of funny. You're like, wait, Val Kilmer as Mark Twain doing like a one-man, like 45-minute stage show. And it was fucking brilliant. He was so good in it. And I remember watching it because he was doing again, oddly, I think he was like at the Disney Concert Hall is like the surprise opening act for, I think Ryan Adams was doing a musical concert there. It was like a very bizarre evening because the audience also were like, they had no idea why they're watching Mark Twain for 45 minutes. And nobody told them it was Val Kilmer. And I was there shooting it for him.
Nobody told them it was Val Kilmer?
It was so bizarre. But the brilliance
funny.
of it. So I'm up in the balcony shooting this thing for Val Kilmer of him doing this show. And he comes out afterwards. He takes the makeup off. And everybody in the audience is kind of dumbfounded. There's like this odd silence because nobody can believe what they're looking at. But he was so fucking good in it. And I just remember watching that performance and being like, shit, that's right. Val Kilmer is an amazingly talented actor. But I feel like after The Island of Dr. Moreau, it was like there was this like long stretch of just not great movies.
Yeah, he kind of fell off the wagon of making great stuff. I mean, other than Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I can't think of anything else that he's done
recently
since
that's great.
Heat. Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is between him and Charlene, like at the very end when he shows up to pick her up. And it's just like his close up at the car, her close up at the balcony. She waves his hand away. And it's all told in basically, 3 shots? His close-up, her close-up, the hand wave. And it's so heartbreaking. And it's so good.
Well, and so much of it is on the backs of both his performance and hers. They are just terrific together.
By the way, can we also talk about how badass Val Kilmer is? Like in the whole shootout scene. And the fact that, it's become famous now. He's shooting out, that shootout, his rifle goes empty, pops the clip, slaps another one in. And they've used that, training facilities for like the Marines and police and special forces have used that clip as a reference of if you could reload in even half that time, you're good. Like, can we just talk about the fact that Val Kilmer trained so hard that he's making like professionals watch his footage and go, God damn, that guy's good. Yeah, total badass.
Right. He's great, and he's just as much a sociopath as Neil is.
Yeah, and what's interesting though is when they come out of the bank, that whole idea of 30 seconds, like when they come out of the bank, what makes I think that shootout scene so shocking is how quickly he goes from 0 to 60. Like he's walking across the street, sees the cops, and there's not even a reaction. Like he just goes. You're like, oh, there's that discipline there that we've been talking about for an hour and 45 minutes. There it is in motion there.
Well, and that's it, because that's what you get with, I think, both De Niro and Kilmer. You get these characters who are there. The reason they are able to move so quickly is because they were already there. I think that's in contrast to Tom Sizemore's Michael Cerrito, who he's the guy who's getting sort of the joy out of it. Like you see, he's already in the car at that point, kind of slapping he's like, we did it, hitting Dennis Haysbert on the back. And so you feel like he's the guy who's going to have to ramp up. He wasn't quite as serious, but in Val Kilmer, you have a stone sober guy.
Yeah, it's the I'm not in the car. We're not driving away. We haven't gotten away with it. We're still in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Cerrito's in there laughing like, hey, the hard part's done. It's like, no, you asshole. Yeah. You're sitting in the car with a machine gun and $12 million. You still have to get away. But actually, I mean, it's going through the cast, like also like Jon Voight is again like just so good in the movie. Jon Voight, watching that movie, I'm like, I love my friends. I have great friends. I'm like, I wish I had Jon Voight's Nate as a friend. Like, that's the guy I want to know.
He's such an interesting character. And I didn't realize this, but he's kind of based on Edward Bunker, who was a real life former career criminal and fence turned writer who actually, I mean, he's written a bunch of books about crime. He was a consultant on the film. He's acted in films. He was Mr. Blue in Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, no, he's great. Yeah.
It's so interesting. And you look at Jon Voight as Nate and you go, oh, okay, yes, I can totally see it now. Like that connection is right there.
Within that framework, you're like, oh yeah, totally. Okay, next one. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I love seeing Tom Noonan. You brought him up. I mean, he's great. I love that just the little thing that, he's in a wheelchair but he's this guy who's like, he lives under these, under the radar towers and the satellite dishes and everything. And he's just, collecting information, putting these plans together. It's really interesting.
And his amazing beard in the movie. Like, it's a pretty, but again, also like Natalie Portman, because I think, this was this was only her second movie after The Professional, right?
It may have been. I mean, she obviously was just so young at the time. I mean, she was just doing such things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she did The Professional, and this was like only her second movie. And same thing, like she's just so damn good.
Yeah, right away you can tell that she's just a child actor who already had an old soul in her. I mean, she carries a lot of heft in both of those films. And we've talked about Leon, the Professional, on this show before. And here you see that same depth to the character and just the darkness she has and just the struggle she has with this absent father. And I really love the moment where I mean, it's a terrifying, terrible moment, but when she's tried to kill herself in Hannah's bathtub at his hotel, you've got that conversation afterward with her mom, Diane Venora, and Al Pacino, where she's like, she chose you. You're the one that she connected to. You're the one that she was crying out to. I found that so interesting that for Hannah, particularly this guy who's walled himself off so much to having these kind of personal relationships, that connection, that kind of defense, he's always looking out for the daughter and he's always kind of frustrated with the father. And here he is with Natalie Portman's character having that connection with him. I just found that just so incredibly touching.
Oh, by the way, let's not forget Jeremy Piven's one scene role in the movie as well.
Yeah, right.
Yes, pivotal.
Totally random. Like that's what I mean. Like this whole movie's like, you're like, holy shit, that guy's in this movie too.
Well, even Bud Cort from Harold and Maude, he pops up as the restaurant owner. I mean, it's like everybody is it.
You're right. Oh, I forgot about that. I totally didn't realize that.
I can't believe I'm the first one to mention Danny Trejo. I mean, come on, Machete.
Yeah, right?
Which, by the way, I love one of the few complaints I have about the movie is when they're having their little powwow about, do we walk away or do we stay? And everybody's talking about, what do you think? What do you think? And everybody gets like this moment of they all get their little moments of we're going to talk about it really side. And then they cut to a wide shot and they turn to Danny Trejo and he's like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. And they're all like, they all laugh about it. Like, okay, cool. And I'm like, well, wait a second. These three guys get to have a say and Danny Trejo's like, yeah, whatever, fuck it, let's go shoot people. And I'm like, wait, he gets no more character development than that? What the shit? No wonder he turned on you guys at the end,
I'm going to do pretty much what the film does with the next three characters, and because this is we'll call it a Mann story, Diane Venora, Ashley Judd, and Amy Brenneman as the representative women.
Justine is such an interesting character to me because I'm watching her going like, from the very opening scene, you're like, yeah, this marriage is not going to last. Like, as an audience, you're like, this isn't going to last. Like, they wake up in the morning after having sex, and she's already popping pills. Like, it's like, all right, this is how she's coping, getting through her day. Their relationship to me gets really interesting late in the movie when she sleeps with Ralph, and then they come back together in the hospital to kind of over her daughter's suicide attempt, and watching of her talking about the only way for me to get closure with you is I have to debase myself with Ralph, and the idea of I'm angry that it can't work but I still love you is really fascinating. Charlene with Ashley Judd, she's great. I mean, again, she loves her husband, she loves Chris so much that which is really, if you think about this, is actually pretty screwed up. She loves him so much that when she has the opportunity, basically comes down to like, hey, it's either Chris or your kid. And when push comes to shove, because if she waves him away and they pull him over and go, oh yeah, this is Chris, and they arrest him, then she loses the kid anyways. So if you think about it, she actually, when push comes to shove between choosing the man she loves and her child, she still sort of leans towards the man she loves at the risk of her child, which I always found really interesting. Like, wow, as much as you love your kid, like when push came to shove, you still rolled the dice on Chris. Amy Brenneman as Edie, it's always funky to me because she's great. I mean, she's great in the movie, but her character always threw me a little bit because I always felt like Macaulay says, hey, run away with me. Where she's like, oh, sure, New Zealand? Yeah, sure, okay, fuck it, let's go to New Zealand. I just met you. I don't know anything about you. Sure, fuck it, let's go. And it always was interesting, like, well, that was really sudden to be like, hey, we just met. Hey, I don't know anything about you, but sure, I'll pack up my whole life and move to New Zealand with you. Why not?
Especially because she's such a May to Robert De Niro's December.
Yeah.
Which, that always strikes me too. I'm like, God, she's, there's so much life for her to still be, seeking out, the graphic design, whatever it is that she's trying to do. And here she is just like, yeah, I'll go. That's one, I love Amy Brenneman. I think she is great in the film too, but I always wonder if I would have liked it more if it was somebody that I would have bought the relationship a little more.
You know what's interesting about it? All three of these women sort of play the same character on a continuum, right? With Diane Venora, we get, they're all broken in sort of the same way. Diane Venora is broken, that she's in a relationship that is already broken, and everybody has come to terms with the fact that it's over. Ashley Judd as Charlene is playing this character who's in the middle of breaking, right? Their relationship is breaking as we watch. And Amy Brenneman is playing this character that is, we know, because we've seen where this goes with these other two ladies, that her relationship will start and then will ultimately break. They're all demonstrating like the same sort of archetype of sort of negative relationships and negative stereotype of this sort of needy character. One of the criticisms that I read repeatedly in researching the film is that the film does not handle female characters well, and in some respects that's because that's the story Michael Mann wanted to tell,
and because it's Michael Mann in general with his films.
That's number two.
He makes Mann films,
right? And number three is we have to acknowledge the fact that no one in this film is really treated all that well. Everybody is broken, and so why should it be any different based on gender here? So
yeah, but it's interesting, the idea too of maybe as an audience, what we find interesting about Edie's character is, of the three women that are predominantly featured in the movie, you can look at Edie and go, these other two are on the downside of what these types of relationships play out to be. You're just getting into it. So maybe as an audience, we're looking going like, oh, we know this can't lead anywhere good. We know that you should not be with Macaulay. You really should say no to New Zealand. You really should be more cautious.
Well, and interesting too, I unintentionally left out Natalie Portman, but really isn't she also a part of this this sort of archetype of broken women? As a young woman, she's incapable of kind of moving forward without attempting suicide.
Although that's an interesting one, because I always felt like that story was very similar to that, that Pacino, revealing like, a backstory that was never addressed in the movie was the fact that Hannah was a coke addict. And you're like, oh, well, the movie framed against that, there's a lot of things that make a bit more sense. With Natalie Portman's character, there's always that question of like, all right, there's an implication of some kind of a mental illness there, some kind of depression, but it's never really specifically addressed. So it becomes a matter of like, is that issue stemming from an issue with her father? Is that stemming from abandonment issues in general? In which case, Hannah is kind of contributing to that of, hey, my dad abandoned me. Hannah is also abandoning me. Basically, everybody in the movie is broken, whether it's men or women. Like everybody in the movie is pretty broken at the end of the day.
No matter what, you're not going to get out of a Michael Mann film in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, nobody's happy in a nobody in a Michael Mann film is happy. Everybody is miserable. Everybody's kind of unhappy. I'm saying maybe instead of starting a petition about Tone Lōc, maybe we start a petition about people giving Michael Mann a hug. Maybe that could be,
just, if you see him on the streets of LA, give this man a hug.
Hugmichaelmann.net. I'm going to go buy that right now.
Well, I think that, I think it'd be important as a part of our conversation with you to talk about the cinematography here. I mean, Dante Spinotti is the cinematographer here, creating just a beautiful look. And obviously there's a lot of wonderful colors and just great, very well shot film. as a cinematographer, I mean, what's your sense of the movie and how they put this together?
I mean, I think Dante Spinotti does beautiful work, period. But I think Heat definitely stands out because so much of the movie is so subtle. Like so much of the movie doesn't look lit at all. And it's making something look unlit takes so much work. Nowadays with digital cameras, it's very easy to walk into places, night exteriors are very easy to turn on the camera and go, well, digital cameras have gotten so sensitive now that you can do so much with so little. You can go out at night and shoot at night, without any light if you really wanted to. You can walk into a room and turn on a lamp in the corner, and sometimes that's sufficient light to shoot. This was back in 1995, before digital, still film. Not at all the case. So everything is very much lit, but none of it feels lit. And I think that's like watching Heat again earlier this week. I was just kind of reminded. I was like, wow, so much of this movie is so subtle and so understated visually that I think that's kind of where the beauty comes from, is that it often feels like cameras just rolled up someplace and started rolling. In reality, watching, I was like, there's so much work happening here to make this look unobtrusive. And there's something also great, especially the night work in LA, all that night work in Los Angeles. Everybody kind of points at Collateral as the kind of one of the first movies to show LA at night, the way it really is, with light bouncing off the sky and the sky pollution you get. Which is true, but watching Heat, that kind of that ugly blue, sodium vapor, orange, like all of those kind of heinous, ugly colors that you get in downtown LA at night or industrial areas that normally to the eye are so kind of garish and ugly, come across so beautifully. Like watching that movie, I was like, yeah, that's what LA at night feels like. Like driving through LA at night, turning the corner, going down the wrong street and going, oh, I don't want to be this part of town. Like all the places that the movie inhabits, that's what LA feels like. Maybe it's not necessarily what it looks like, and I think that's maybe what the better part of it, the big accomplishment of his work is, in addition to just being so subtle and so nuanced that it's very hard to point out. It's very hard to point and say, oh, this is a beautiful shot, because everything's kind of beautiful in a very simplistic way. Maybe the better compliment is the movie feels like LA. Like it may not necessarily look like it literally, but watching, you're like, yeah, that's what LA feels like at night. Like that's what 4:00 in the morning feels like in Los Angeles. There's so little handheld work in the movie. Really, there's a lot of Steadicam, but there's not a lot of handheld except for I think the shootout in downtown. That's kind of the first time you see a lot of. And even then, there's not a lot of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I wasn't even thinking about that, but it's certainly something that caught my eye when I was watching the very first heist when they break into the armored truck to get all the
bonds. The
bonds from Van Zandt. You've got this intense buildup to kind of, as we're seeing what's going on here, and we see kind of the pieces coming into place, and then when they knock the vehicle over with the rig and it crashes into a whole bunch of other cars, you get this very still shot. It's like it's amazing that they kind of cut this in there, but it's just a very still shot as a pole kind of tips over and a streamer that was on it just very slowly drifts down. I'm like, this is in the middle of like a big action scene, and they took the time for that. It was amazing.
Oh God, Andy, what's so great about that is that I'm sitting there as an audience member and I am literally holding my breath. That's what that does to me in terms of the pacing of that sequence. It makes me stop and hold my breath.
It's the calm before the storm, because it's the shock factor of holy shit. And then, because as an audience, again, it's that, I think it's that build up letdown. It's that idea of like the build up of, boom, cars. This is, all this sudden violence. So as an audience, the adrenaline kicks in. You're like, okay, this is the mode the movie's in now. And then you put that moment in there of stillness. So as an audience, you're like, well, wait a second. I'm prepared for this. What the shit is happening, and then they're right back into it, that kind of violence. It's the same thing, the bank robbery at the end in the streets of, we're walking out, everything's fine, and then Val Kilmer goes from 0 to 60. It's the same kind of shock factor, but I think the reverse of oh, we're going to take this moment of stillness and something that's almost comical, that streamer kind of floating down in slow motion before right back into, guns and masks and explosions, et cetera, et cetera.
The other thing it is visually is it's an exercise in contrast for us, because so much of this film is plays out in very long lenses, right? Where, and then the contrast is we're going to stop and we're going to show you escape with a very wide lens, and we're going to show you the whole street, and you're going to get to take it all in before we jump right back in to look at the close-ups, close-up of masked gunman, close-up of ponytailed masked gunman, close-up of scared police officer. Everything else plays in such tight quarters that those breaks where we get to see escape in the sequence is a pause.
One other thing watching the movie that I was reminded of, piggybacking that idea, is I think a bit of Dante and Michael at the same time. How beautifully executed and staged all of the action sequences are. Because now there's such a prevalence to long lenses and handheld and this kind of keeping a certain kind of erratic energy on screen when you get into actions, big action scenes, and especially if the action's really big and there's a lot of ground to cover. It feels like more chaotic things get. And watching the movie again, all of the robberies, the opening with the armored truck, the shootout in downtown. What I think makes it work so great is you don't have that concept, you don't have that kind of shaky, erratic, handheld look that you find in a lot of modern action stuff. It's all fairly controlled, but more than that, as an audience, you're never lost on the geography. Like, you always know where you are within the sequence. You always know the relationship of where people are. You always know this person is here in relation to this person. I know where everybody's at. I know where all the action's happening. As an audience, you never lose a sense of geography. And that energy and the adrenaline and the excitement is still all there without resorting to, shaky snap zooms to kind of create false energy. And I think watching it, I was like, that's what's great to me, is that, this camera's, flying around in a Steadicam. There's a lot of cuts. There's a lot of close-ups. I feel the chaos of what's happening, but as an audience, I'm never confused as to where I'm at or what's happening. It's very precise in a lot of ways.
And isn't that a case example in the closing sequence where we have this sort of chess scene, right? This chess game played out with the lights flying over and the these two guys dancing in the shadows at the end of this runway. And what really stuck out to me is the shot length of this sequence as we start with slightly longer shots, of these guys as they're moving throughout these small buildings at the end of the runway, and the lights are flying overhead, and the shots get faster and faster and faster. And I think, to your point of false energy, nowhere in here did I need the camera to start shaking around in order to give me that sense of energy. That energy was built with these two guys creeping around through cuts and shot length, increasing the frequency of shots over time alone.
Good cinematography is so reliant, I think, also on strong editing choices, but it's not, and when I say that, I don't mean it's not just what choices are the editor going to make. It's the choices that a director and a cinematographer are going to make in terms of, we're going to do this shot that's then we're going to juxtapose this shot with this shot. Like, so much of cinematography is when you're shooting going, how are these two shots? How are these three shots? How are these 500 shots going to go together? Now, obviously, an editor comes in and has their own taste, their own ideas, but the initial idea becomes so important. So that idea of, like, going back to the armored truck, of, after the truck hits, we're going to have this big wide shot and we're going to let it play out for a moment. And maybe that streamer falling in was a happy accident. Maybe that was planned, but that shot and that kind of stillness of showing the full scope of what just happened before we're back into all those close-ups is such a great decision. The same thing at the end of, we're moving around, but there's not erratic camera movement. We're not spinning around the characters. We're not doing a lot of like crazy overhead shots. It does become a game of cat and mouse, of all these boxes look the same. So to a certain extent, as an audience, you do kind of get lost of, I don't know which box he's behind. I don't know, is he going to hop out and there he's going to be? And then when you finally do get your bearings, you're like, oh wait, now I'm not confused. Okay, now I know where they are. So now at the very end, that's where the tension comes out from. I think I was confused first about where people were intentionally, now I know the geography. So now I know that he's at that corner and he's approaching that corner. And at any moment, one of them is going to pop out and only one person can make it out alive here.
You know, that's an interesting thing. It's really the fact that they do intersperse the longer, wider shots that give us the overall sense of geography that builds intensity for us. It's only once we know, as an audience, we know where these guys are in relation to one another, that we're actually able to feel nervous for them both.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump back, kind of going back to something else with Spinotti that I thought about. One of the things that I think is really stunning about his work in the movie too, just lighting-wise, in addition to just kind of how subtle and nuanced things are and how naturalistic, and again, I mean this in the best way, how like kind of, I shouldn't say always, but often almost flat and almost borderline ugly the lighting is. And it's very interesting because it's in a lot of ways, it's similar to The Insider, which again, Michael Mann and Dante Spinotti, like the idea of, in that movie, like they do the opposite. There's a lot of like really harsh lighting and a lot of really hard light and a lot of very vibrant and colorful. Whereas here, everything's a little muted. Everything's very soft. But there are things you're watching going like, I mean, towards the end of the movie, Macaulay, walking through the hotel, watching that going like, all right, that on its surface is pretty flat. It's a bunch of wall sconce lights. In a hallway, like the lighting is fairly flat, fairly even. But again, watching it is you're like, but there's a certain kind of beauty that comes out of that. And I think that's kind of the brilliance of Dante Spinotti is being able to find things that, under normal circumstance, you'd look and go are either unremarkable or unattractive. And he finds kind of a brilliant way to frame those in a way that you look and go, oh, that's actually beautiful. I've never seen it that way before.
We talked a little bit about that in our last Speakeasy about Fat City, which takes place in Stockton, California. And boy, they do an amazing job of making you kind of, well, at least making me kind of fall in love with a lot of the ugliness going on.
Yeah,
there
and
place.
that's so. I mean, again, Conrad Hall, like it's always interesting to me how much work it takes to make something look like you didn't do any work. And how much talent it takes to make something that in anybody else's hands would be ugly and unattractive actually take on its own kind of beauty. My wife says a lot, because she loves to sing and she'll screw around with people and sing terribly, and she's actually got a beautiful voice, and it's that idea of to sing terribly, you actually have to be able to sing really well. Right. So it's that kind of inverse thing. If somebody can watch and go, oh, that movie looks completely unlit and natural, like they didn't do anything. I'm like, that's probably the biggest compliment you can give to a cinematographer, because it takes so much work and talent to do that.
The cinematography, I mean, obviously, this is a long movie. They shot a lot of film, and like you said, this was filmed back in '95. They had to have a team of 4 main editors working on this to cut this thing together. What I find interesting, there's this website that we haven't looked at in a long time, Pete, but Cinemetrics. Yeah, Cinemetrics, they actually have people who go through a movie and average out the shots, so you can get a sense of how many or how long is the average shot length in a movie. Just as a comparison, I thought it would be interesting to look at. In this movie, the average shot length is 4.4 seconds, which seems pretty short when you hear it that way. But then when you compare it to The Rock, which came out the following year, directed by Michael Bay, that's at 2.5 seconds. And then we've talked about the Bourne series on this show. The Bourne Identity is at 3.6 seconds.
Which is a leisurely 3.6.
I'm like, I really would have thought oh, you're talking about the Bourne Identity. You're talking about the first one, right?
Right.
I was going to say, like, Bourne Supremacy, are we like into fractions of seconds?
Yeah, Bourne Supremacy drops down to 1.1 second is the average shot length.
That sounds about, I actually would have thought it would have been shorter. I thought they would have been like decimal points at that point.
I know. Ultimatum, they're at 2.1. They came up a little bit.
Oh, they doubled it. Oh, impressive.
Yeah. And Legacy, it wasn't Greengrass in that one, but it was back down to 1.3. So they went pretty short for Legacy.
I feel like you're making commercials at that point.
Right, exactly. So this 4.4 seconds average shot length feels awfully snail paced.
Well, and doesn't it really fit into one of the things that Mann has said over and over? This is not a genre film; it's a drama.
Right.
Yeah. And it at 4.4 seconds feels dramatic.
Right.
But it's interesting because it's this we've talked about it's this kind of sprawling epic crime thriller drama thing. if you take all the giant action set pieces away from it, to a certain extent, it's, I don't know, this, again, in the alternate universe where so many other beautiful things exist, such as Tone Lōc playing Hannah, in that same alternate universe, it'd be interesting to see this movie with Pacino and De Niro not playing a cop and robber, but playing some other parts that are also direct opposition to each other. Like, to a certain extent, the movie really is, it's a drama that happens to have some action pieces in it. But you could take those action pieces out, and I would still argue that the movie, dramatically and story-wise, performance-wise, would still be just as strong.
This movie's practically Dead Poets Society.
Alternate universe movies here.
I'm telling you, this show is an incredible resource for aspiring YouTubers.
It's a brainchild for alternate universe movies that have to be made. I demand it.
Right here. Yes, indeed.
Let's talk about the music a little bit.
Elliot Goldenthal does the score, and I mean, he comes into this with kind of an avant-garde, especially for the time, score that it doesn't really have themes. It's just vibes. It just gives you a sense of what's going on. Same thing with the music, and Michael Mann is really a filmmaker who likes just a lot of really interesting tracks in his films. The music in this film works so well, both the songs that he picks and the score. I just find it such energetic pieces that give such life to it.
It's also like such iconic music. Like some of that, you know, like the bank robbery. You know, when that first shot of Macaulay walking into the door. You know, and that kind of industrial and the drum beats hitting over and over again. Like you hear the first 2 seconds of that music, and immediately you're like, oh, that's from Heat. Wow, I really want to go rob a bank right now. Like that music is just so, it's very iconic, but you're right. It's what I love about it too is kind of going back to that idea we were talking about earlier of architecture and industry play such a big part visually. Like almost all of the music and the soundtrack feels very industrial. It feels very kind of metallic and artificial, and it feels like the locations in the movie.
That's really interesting. It really does tie into everything Michael Mann is doing, creating this world.
Yeah, and the song at the end that plays over the end scene of them, you know, the two men holding hands out in that field. That scene plays well by itself, but with that music, I think that music really ties together and makes that scene really sing. Like without the music, the scene is strong. With the music, that scene wraps up the whole movie, and you go, okay, that's the ending. That's the ending that I wanted and the movie deserved, and I'm satisfied with it.
Yeah, that track, that's God Moving Over the Face of the Waters by Moby.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song, but more than that, it's like you said, Michael Mann does in all of his movies. There's a heavy reliance in a good way on music. But I think it's done, especially Heat, just so well of the music is really matching the visuals, which is really matching the themes and the tone of the whole movie.
I have to say, you know, just a little bit of a heartbreaking bit of awareness that the other Moby track on here, New Dawn Fades, which was originally Joy Division, I like Moby's version better, and it's probably because of this film. So with apologies to Joy Division.
I mean, if I recall, I mean, this is now a while ago, but I think this may have been the first time I heard Moby at all was in this movie.
Oh, wow.
Might have been for me too. I'm not sure when did he really kick off his career? I don't even know.
Moby special event, next real special event show.
That's right. Well, that'll be coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon.
This film, weirdly, did not get any Oscar nominations. And I don't know if I'm saying that with surprise or not. Because, I mean, it's a genre film, I guess. It's not the sort of thing, especially in 95, that you would have seen getting any Oscar nominations. But even, I mean, I kind of came back to this going, oh, well, I'm sure it got a nomination for like best sound mixing. Best editing, something like that. Nothing, not a single award nomination for this film. It got some, minor sorts of nominations in other film critics things. I don't know. It surprised me. Did it surprise either of you?
It's funny. It's surprising. Like you hear that now, you go like, what the shit? How did that happen? And it's shocking, and it's a crime. And you get outraged, and you go, yeah, but there's such a long history of some brilliant things being totally overlooked. I mean, it's the, Gordon Willis never being nominated for an Oscar. You know, it's Blade Runner didn't get nominated for an Oscar for its cinematography. Like,
Right.
so just, you look, there's a track record of movies that I think we look at nowadays, decades after the release, when you go, this is kind of a miniature masterpiece that holds up today better than ever, and is still such a big influence for people. But when it got released, it didn't get any love. There's a reason the last week, everybody from the movie got together, for a 25-year anniversary, and now, 2017 was it 27 years later, they're re-releasing the movie yet again in 4K. It's like they don't do that unless it's a movie that has such relevance, and is such a good, powerful movie.
Yeah, it has the staying power.
Yeah, on one hand, I'm out. I hear that, and I'm outraged. I'm like, that's bullshit, and what the hell, and how does it happen? And we should start a letter writing campaign to have this retroactively fixed. But I'm like, yeah, but no, because I'm going to go spend my time for the the Tone Lōc version of Heat, and instead, I'm also going like, there's such a long history of that kind of thing happening that I'm actually not surprised.
Well, and I think the important thing is that, even if it didn't get nominated, it is a film that is going to linger. This is a film that will stick in people's minds long after the fact. And even Michael Mann, he's recently started a book company, Michael Mann Books. And one of the first 3 books, which I believe they're actually working on right now, is a prequel to Heat. And it's going to be kind of the formative years of all of these characters, which it's a story that people latch onto and love and want to keep being drawn back into.
How badly do you want that to be a Netflix original?
Oh my God. I was just thinking,
So
I was like, holy shit, please tell me that Netflix just heard that and bought that up. I would be sitting there with like a pizza and a 10-pound bag of popcorn and just binge watch it all damn night. That would be amazing.
Andy, how did it do?
This film did well for itself. This film was released December 15th, 1995. It cost $60 million to make this movie, which in retrospect seems kind of small for what they accomplished. But when you say, it's largely a drama, I guess I can kind of buy into that. I couldn't find anything as far as its print and advertising budget. So, but domestically, it ended up making about $67.4 million and internationally about $120 million. So all told, it definitely made its money back and ended up with an adjusted profit per finished minute of about $1.1 million per finished minute. And that is a film that's, 172 minutes long.
Stellar.
That's pretty great. Which, by today's standards would probably still make it a colossal flop. So.
Yeah, right. Well, I think with all of that said, now is the time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
You head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel and you will see our list of all the films that we have ever ranked on this show. We're going to do it this week. We've got a little trio here. So we're going to rank this film and see where it lands on our list.
So first up, we have Heat or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Heat, please.
Heat.
Definitely Heat. Definitely. All right, next up, Heat or Never Let Me Go, another Speakeasy movie we talked about.
Heat.
Yeah, it's
definitely
Heat. Never Let Me Go was lovely.
It was lovely, but it's not Heat. It's no. I like George Clooney, but it's no Heat. So,
yeah, right.
All right, next up, Heat or The Matrix. Getting a little tougher here.
I'd have to go Heat still.
I'm Heat.
I may say The Matrix, but I don't think it really matters.
It would be a principal loss.
I feel like Matrix is, it's like you watch and go, that was fun. Okay, I don't need to watch that for a few more years.
Okay, next up, Heat. Oh, this is, now it's getting real tough. Heat or Children of Men?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's, son of a... I'm gonna... Wow.
This is what we call a flick chart hate crime.
Oh, that's just cruel. Why would you do that? I'm gonna go Children of Men. I have such an affinity for that movie.
Children of Men.
Yeah, I'm saying Children of Men.
I gotta tell you, I'm surprised. I'm Heat all the way. I know principled loss.
Okay.
But I'm definitely Heat.
They're both great.
Yes,
movies.
Both great.
All right, Heat or Snatch, a very fun movie.
Heat.
I'm gonna go Heat.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Heat too.
I'm gonna say that quietly because my wife loves the movie Snatch. So if I were to say that, she'd hear me. I'd be sleeping on the couch. So I'm gonna go for Heat.
All right, Heat or Casino Royale. We're getting a lot of Speakeasy episodes.
I know, one
on this
after
one.
the other.
Heat or Casino Royale. Oof.
Oh, I feel like these are kind of unfair because it also depends on your mood, you know?
Oh, no. Let's be clear. They're all unfair. They're categorically unfair.
I still, kind of one-track mind. I'm still going to go with Heat.
Pete?
I can only say this because I've already wrestled with it on my own flick chart. I am Heat.
I'm really torn. These are all just brutal. I'm gonna go with Heat also, although I could say Casino Royale on a different day. And next up, Heat or Room, the recent Oscar nominee.
Oh, Room. For a second, I was like, wait, Room or The Room?
Oh,
I was like,
that's a totally different experience.
I was like, wait a second. Now we have an intro. Now it's gotten really interesting. I'm like, hold on. Can we somehow find a world where those two movies coexist together, like some kind of crossover hybrid?
Oh, that's just crazy.
Again, if there's some YouTuber out there with some amazing skills, here's an opportunity. You're welcome. I'm going to go with Heat. I thought Room was a really beautiful movie, and I loved it. But as triumphant as you feel at the end, the beginning of it is so heart-wrenching. I'm like, I just don't need to feel that bad about myself over and over again.
Well, Heat has definitely more of a rewatch factor for me, so I'm going to say Heat.
I am Heat as well.
All right, next up, Heat or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Oh, this is bad people. You're just bad
torture.
People. Who makes this website, by the way? I need names.
Do not question the algorithm. Do not question the algorithm.
I feel like this is how Skynet starts, right? Like the slow torment.
This is it right here.
I'm gonna go with Butch Cassidy.
I am also Butch Cassidy.
All right, I'm Heat, but Butch Cassidy takes it, and there we are. That really shot up here. We are at number 18 on our flick chart ranking. 18 out of 262. So that is a pretty solid spot there.
Nice.
We also do a Letterboxd ranking, Jason, letterboxd.com/the next reel. And this is just out of 5 stars. I'm guessing that you're going to give this a 5 out of 5.
For Heat? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This would definitely be a 5 out of 5 for me.
Yes, me too. A hearty 5 stars.
Yeah, definitely for me. This is, Michael Mann really at the top of his game. I mean, he's just a stellar filmmaker, and this is just, I think, I'm always torn. I think Collateral may be my favorite Michael Mann film because I just really enjoy that one. But boy, these two are just they're neck and neck. You
might be the only other person I have ever met that enjoyed Collateral. I get so much grief. I'm like, Collateral's a really good movie. And everyone's like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no, actually, Tom Cruise is really good in it. Like, it's actually, for what it is, actually, I think Collateral's a really good movie and really enjoyable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love that movie.
I've stopped saying it out loud because I get so much grief about it. So it's become like my little personal, like late at night, I close the blinds and I make sure, make sure the windows are shut so nobody can hear me, in the dark watching Collateral on headphones. And watch it in shame.
Well, you can come over and watch it anytime over here.
Done and done.
I'll gladly put it on. And then we can go give Michael Mann a hug.
And oh, Michael, you need a hug. You also need to put Tone Lōc in more movies. Come on.
Yes, indeed. Well, so Jason, thanks for coming and joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, guys.
It's been a lot of fun. If people want to learn more about you or track you down on the internet, do you have a home on the internets where people can dig in?
I have a website that is being redone right now. Not as fast as my agent would like it redone, but it's being redone. It's just JaysonCrothers.com. You can go there and see stuff that I've done and see what I've been up to. And
well, now we already talked in the introduction what you are actually up to. What are you? Tell us a little bit about what you're up to and are most excited about right now.
I'm still out in Chicago on season 5 of Chicago Fire, and I'll be here. The season goes all the way until the end of April next year. So that's what I'm up to now, and I'm excited. It starts airing in October. I'm excited for it to start airing because we do some really amazing things for considering it's network television. We do some pretty amazing things every episode. So I'm very excited for everybody to see that, and it's just an amazing group of people. So it's it's always cool to work with people that you really like and respect, who are great at what they do, and you get to work with them and do really awesome stuff.
Do you get to work on the crossover episodes when they roll around?
Well, now that there's 4 shows now, so there's Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago Med, and they just started shooting the 4th show, which is Chicago Justice, which is a legal show. There's like the big advertised crossover episodes, but almost every episode is sort of a mini crossover because we share cast between shows. So on any, last night we had cast members from one of the other shows in some of our scenes, and we share some of our cast with the other shows. So every week is sort of like little miniature crossovers. And then once or twice.
How brilliant is that?
It's pretty great. I mean, it's interesting because being in the middle of it, it's very easy to lose sight of the scope of things. Occasionally I'll step back and go, oh, this is actually 4 totally different shows playing on different nights on NBC. The 4 of them combined kind of create this entire little universe of characters and stories that carry over between 4 different shows and all these different cast members.
Yeah, talk about world building. I just find that so fascinating.
And again, now they've added the Chicago Justice, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But yeah, that's what I'm up to now. I'll be doing that until at least April of next year. And it starts airing in October. And I'm excited because we do every week we get to blow things up and flip fire trucks and do all sorts of cool shit.
It's a dream job, man.
It is a dream job. I get to go hang out I get to ride on top of fire trucks and blow shit up and set things on fire. And, how many people get paid to go, create mayhem and chaos, And then I don't even have to clean it up. That's the best part. I can show up and create and blow things up and orchestrate chaos, and then somebody else cleans it up. It's awesome.
It's a short and distinguished list.
That was so fun.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. Really, thank you for doing this and being a part of it. We sure
This
appreciate your time.
It was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. And for everybody out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, Pinterest, Letterboxd, Flickchart, and YouTube. And don't forget to head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and comment. It really does help more people find us. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time, I've got 30 seconds to drop everything and get out of here. It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise. We aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today.